Okay, so I know breath and working on your breath kind of sounds a little mundane, but I promise you, this is the foundational piece on getting your diastasis recti healed correctly. So this is the single, to me, most important thing that with any movement is really nailing down the breath work. And so I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of background on our core canister and the overall concept of our core isn't just our abdominals. So your core is a pressure system. It is, I call it the core canister. So think about your diaphragm sits on top, your pelvic floor sits on bottom, and your abdominals are in between, along with your multifidi and other supporting muscles in the trunk of the body. So within this core canister, breath plays such a huge role here. So as you inhale, that diaphragm flattens out and increases that abdominal pressure in the trunk of the body. That pelvic floor then relaxes and releases. So as you exhale, that diaphragm contracts or kind of comes up back into the rib cage. The pelvic floor contracts and lifts. So our transverse abdominals, which is our corset muscle, that wraps around the entire trunk of the body. As we exhale, it is kind of the secondary respiratory muscle that kind of brings everything in. So we call it the corset muscle. So think about as you exhale, it kind of brings everything down and in towards the spine. So then obviously you have your rectus abdominals, which is your superficial six-pack abs. And then we also have your obliques. We have external and internal obliques on both sides. I like to kind of call them like my hoodie pocket, like muscles. And then we have our multifidi, which is in the back of the body on either side of the spine. So all of these come together to make up your core. So there is this big misconception that sometimes your core is like, oh, people think of their abs. But the abs are just only one piece of the puzzle. So whenever we go into core connection or core strengthening, anything that is basically core related, I always like to tie the breath in first because, again, that diaphragm, that pelvic floor, those are our breathing muscles, and those are super important to have nice and strong to then help create and manage that intra-abdominal pressure on the inside. So in my core series on demand, I kind of walk a little bit deeper into this because there's so much that like goes into at play here. Our alignment of the rib cage and pelvis really is a factor whenever it comes to stacking the diaphragm over the pelvic floor. So that is in that whole section if you want to deep dive a little bit further. But there's a couple of dysfunctional breathing patterns that we do that in our everyday lives that we've just learned over time. And so chest breathing, huge one. That is basically where nothing moves from the rib cage down. We're always breathing in this clavicle area or in our collarbone area. That is where the pelvic floor gets no signal at all. So the second one is breath holding under load. How many times have you been lifting weights or doing Pilates or running and you realize, oh, I've been holding my breath, or oh, I forgot to breathe? I see that all the time. And it's just something that, you know, the pressure spikes and you start to go straight. The pressure goes straight into that diastasis recti and on the pelvic floor whenever we're holding and bracing. So that's a dysfunctional pattern that we want to kind of nick as much as we can. And then paradoxical breathing, which is where the belly sucks in on the inhale. And we don't want that. We want the belly to inflate, or think of a balloon inflating whenever you inhale. That again, that pressure is expanding in the abdominal cavity or canister on our inhales. So whenever we suck in, where does it have to go? The pressure has to go somewhere. So those are a couple of things that, a couple of dysfunctional breathing patterns that we really want to try to relearn the right way to do it, or a more functional way to do it. So the first one that I teach all the time is bottom up breathing. This is my number one favorite breathing pattern. And essentially it's where we're going to dissect the core into 3 sections. And so I'm going to teach it to you right now. It actually ties in several different breathing patterns. So it ties in pelvic floor, it ties in diaphragmatic breathing, and it ties in our 360 rib cage breathing. So if you want to go ahead, I'm just going to roll over here and get on a mat or on the floor. You can have your knees bent, and then just go ahead and have your hands relaxing by your hips. And then if you want, you can even close your eyes. This is also a really good breathing pattern for nervous system regulation. So I love to do this throughout the day, even whenever I need to get into a more like rest and digest state. But I want you to go ahead, close your eyes, and then I want you to breathe normally. So whenever you take a big breath in, where do you notice the breath goes? Do you feel like it goes into the front of the rib cage? Do you feel like, ooh, it's all in my belly? Just kind of take inventory of where is the breath and where do you feel stuck? Exhale all the air out. We'll do one more breath before I start guiding you into my 3-part breath work. And exhale all the air out. Okay, so now I want you to go ahead. Think about inhaling into your sit bones. Sit bones are the 2 bony structures at the bottom of the pelvis. So think of taking a nice deep inhale in. Exhale all the air out and relax. And at the end of the exhale, think of bringing your sit bones together. And we're going to do that 2 more times. Take a nice deep inhale into the sit bones. Exhale all the air out and relax. And at the end of the exhale, think of bringing the sit bones together. And then let's do one more. Take a nice deep inhale into the sit bones. Exhale all the air out and relax. And at the end of the exhale, think of bringing the sit bones together. Okay, so then we're going to bring our awareness to the hip bones. So if you want to even put your hands on your belly, you're totally fine to do so. And I want you to think you're going to take a nice deep inhale into the hip bones. Exhale, relax. And at the end of the exhale, think of bringing the hip bones together. And let's do 2 more. Take a nice deep inhale into the hip bones. Exhale, relax. And at the end of the exhale, think of bringing the hip bones together. And then last one, take a nice deep inhale in. Exhale all the air out. And at the end of the exhale, think of bringing the hip bones together. Okay, so we're going to then bring our awareness to the rib cage. So you can bring your hands on either side of the ribs if you like. What we're really wanting to focus on is inhaling into the rib cage 360 around the body. So we're going to take a nice deep inhale into the rib cage, into the armpits, into the back, into the collarbone. Exhale, relax. And at the end of the exhale, think of bringing the small circle of the rib cage together. Or you can even imagine you're closing that umbrella up. Let's do 2 more. Inhaling into the rib cage, armpits, collarbone, back. Exhale all the air out. And at the end of the exhale, think of bringing that small circle of the rib cage together. And then last time, take a nice deep inhale in. Exhale all the air out. And at the end of the exhale, think of bringing that small circle in the rib cage together. Okay, so then we're going to tie all 3 in. So I want you to pause for a second. If you feel like, oh my goodness, I cannot feel it in my belly, then go ahead, pause, take a couple breaths into the hip bones and kind of just work on that area for now. If you felt activation in all 3, and expansion in all three, then let's go ahead and move forward, and we're going to tie them all together. So this is going to teach a bottom up breathing pattern that I love to teach my clients, that takes the load off of the pelvic floor. It then helps everything come back together for a diastasis recti, but it also helps us activate this low belly, which a lot of us have a really hard time doing, especially if you had a C-section or anything to where you have this disconnection here. So I want you to go ahead, take a nice deep inhale into the sit bones, hip bones, collarbone, rib cage, back, armpits. Exhale all the air out. And at the end of the exhale, think of bringing the sit bones, hip bones, and small circle in the rib cage together. And then we're going to do two more. Take a nice deep inhale into the sit bones, hip bones, rib cage. Exhale all the air out. And at the end of the exhale, think of bringing the sit bones, hip bones, and small circle in the rib cage together. Let's do one more. Take a nice deep breath in. Exhale all the air out. And at the end of the exhale, think sit bones, hip bones, and small circle under the rib cage together. Okay, so with that breathing pattern, I really like to train the body to bottom up breathe. And so it took me a while to kind of really get that, my mind and my body to really work together on that. So just be patient with yourself. Take some time, practice it. I usually like to do 5 to 8 breaths on each section and then tie it all together. But there was a point in time where I could not feel any low belly activation after having my third baby. And I had a very, very, very hard time connecting to the core in between the hip bones. And so I had to focus on that area for quite some time and then tie it all together. But again, if you want to deep dive further into this, I created a online or an on-demand collection of videos that walk you through my 3-part format on how to reconnect to your core, especially whenever you have a diastasis recti. This is also great for those that just have a hard time connecting to their core in general. So, but if you ever have any questions, feel free to email me at jessica@vesselpilates.com. But I will also send the link below on our online on-demand diastasis recti healing platform. So if you, again, have any questions, just let us know. And I am so happy that you're here.